Hello and welcome back to another full step-by-step PC build guide, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build a PC in the brand new Lian Li O11 Vision. Now this case has glass on three sides, the front, the side and the top, which should definitely improve the aesthetics, but what will it do to the airflow? I'll be looking forward to checking that out later on. But before we get to that, we've got to put the PC together, and I'm going to be showing you step by step how to do that with all the parts I've got in front of me. So in terms of the parts I'm going to be building with today, for the motherboard I'm going to be using ASRock's new Phantom Gaming Z790 Riptide Wi-Fi. For the CPU I'm going to be using Intel's new 14th gen flagship, the 14900K. Keeping our CPU cool, I've got a 360mm AIO from Lian Li. It's their new Galahad 2 Trinity performance. For RAM, I've got 32GB of TEAMGROUP's T-Force Delta RGB DDR5 at 6000 megatransfers per second. For storage, I'm going with a single Gen 4 NVMe drive for this build. It's from Lexar and it's their NM790 in 2TB capacity. Powering the whole build, I've got a 1200 watt fully modular ATX 3.0 power supply from Thermaltake. It's their Toughpower PF3. For the graphics card, I'm going to be using the Aorus Master RTX 4070. And for case fans, I'm going to be using Lian Li's AL120 VT Uni fans in black. Okay, that's all the parts. Let's make a start by taking a really detailed look at the case. So the thing that sets this apart from Lian Li's other O11 cases is the fact that as well as tempered glass on the front and on the side, we've also got it on the top of the case. So our three tempered glass panels aren't going to join seamlessly. This is just some protection for shipping that we've got between the panels. And what holds them together is this magnetic pyramid in the corner of the three panels. And Lian Li say this can hold up to 35 kilos of force. So in terms of removing the tempered glass side panel, we've got a captive thumb screw at the back, which we need to loosen. Then there's a little lever at the back we can simply pull forward and lift the panel away. To remove our tempered glass top panel, we've got two captive thumb screws at the back we need to loosen. Then we can pull the panel backwards, lift up and away. Taking a look at our case's front I/O, we've got two USB Type-A ports, a single Type-C port and a combined headphone and microphone jack. Our power button is further up on the front panel, and one of the nice things about this, it can be pushed both from the front and also from the side. And just below the power button on the side, we've got a reset button. Taking a look at our other side panel, we've got two large perforated areas to provide airflow. This one's for fans and radiators on the side, and our power supply and hard drives are going to be here. To remove this side panel, it's just a simple matter of pulling it out from the back, and then the panel can be lifted up and away. If we take a look at the back of the panel we've just removed, you'll notice there's no additional dust filters, and Lian Li are going with just mesh on this case. For most builds, there's absolutely no need to remove the front tempered glass panel, and in fact Lian Li recommend that you don't do this. Although in the manual they do show you how to do it, so for completeness I will show you how to do it, and also for me recording this build without the panel in the way, it'll help make it better angles. But if you're building in the PC, you should probably leave this on. So we've got this thumb screw down at the bottom we need to remove, and then there's a screw down at the bottom corner. We've then got three screws in the second compartment to remove, and that should then allow us to pull off this panel. And again, just be careful removing this panel. You're not going to want to remove it very far because your power and reset button cables are still connected up to it. So I'm just going to leave that sitting to the side for now, and you can see we've got four screws which hold the tempered glass panel in place. Then with all four of the screws removed, we can simply tilt the tempered glass panel out and lift it up and away. So we've got two options with this little panel on the side. It is possible that we could just clip it back on now. The other thing we can do is actually remove it. So not the easiest thing for me to get a good shot of, but there's a little clip over to the side of the cable we just need to push in, and then that's going to allow us to pull the cable out. So there you go. So that's the cable removed, and that was the little clip I was talking. You just needed to push that in to free it up. So in terms of motherboard support, the case supports motherboards up to ATX in size, and you want to go with a CPR cooler. The maximum height supported is 174mm. So the motherboard tray in this case is removable, allowing you to install your motherboard and potentially your CPR cooler outside the case before slotting the whole thing back in. The other option that you have is you can install the motherboard tray in two different positions. So out of the box it comes installed in the high position, but it is also possible to move the motherboard tray down to the low position. And depending on the position you have the motherboard tray in is going to determine your cooling hardware. So in terms of what you can install on the sides, it doesn't matter what position you've got the motherboard in. You're going to be able to install three 120mm fans or two 140mm fans, or up to a 360 or 280mm radiator. So at the bottom of the case, regardless of the position you've got the motherboard in, you're going to be able to mount up to 3 120 or 3 140mm fans. If you keep it in its default high position, you're also going to be able to mount a radiator at the bottom, and you can mount a 360mm radiator up to 95mm in thickness, or a 280mm radiator up to 53mm in thickness. At the rear of the case, in the default high position, it's up to a 120mm fan or radiator, whereas the big advantage in moving the motherboard down to the low position, because obviously it's not going to give you any extra clearance to mount anything at the top, you'll be able to fit up to 2 120mm fans or up to a 240mm radiator at the rear. So to make installing your fans and radiators a little bit easier, we've got a removable fan stroke radiator bracket at the bottom of the case. It's held on with 2 screws. And then when the screw is removed, it's just a simple matter of tilting the bracket up and lifting it out. And you can see our case's one and only dust filter is down at the bottom of the case. It's a full-length dust filter, and we can simply pull it out from the front for cleaning. We've also got a removable fan stroke radiator bracket on the side of the case. To remove it, we need to push this thumb screw down. That's going to free the bracket up. We can tilt it backwards, lift it up and away. So this bracket can be installed in 2 different positions. In its default position, you've got 75mm of clearance in the main compartment of the case for fans and radiators. If we switch the bracket round, so we'll take it out, flip it round and pop it back into place, you'll notice now that the bracket has moved further into the second compartment, and we've now got 116.5mm of space in the main compartment for fans and radiators, so perfect for a push-pull configuration. In terms of graphics card support, you can see at the rear of the case we've got 7 horizontal PCI expansion slot brackets, and the maximum length of graphics card supported is up to 430mm and up to a maximum width of 176mm. So your GPU is going to be really well supported in this case with Lian Li's included GPU support bracket. So after installing your motherboard, you're not going to use screws for these 2 standoffs. You're going to actually install an additional standoff. So we can simply screw the standoffs into place. And if you need to tighten them further, Lian Li include a standoff insertion and removal tool. We can then insert this little metal bracket over the top and secure it into place with 2 screws. We've then got this little padded bracket, and it's just a matter of picking one of the holes that is going to be underneath your graphics card, and then we've got a screw and washer to secure it into place. So you're just going to screw it in loosely first of all, so it can move up and down. You're then going to slide it up to where it supports your graphics card, and then tighten the screw up. Next, I want to show you how to remove the motherboard tray. So there's 3 standoffs on the back we need to remove, and there's 1 thumb screw in the main body of the case we need to loosen. With it loosened, we're going to simply be able to tilt the motherboard tray out and lift away. So this is then going to allow you to do your installation of your motherboard, your CPU cooler, and potentially even your graphics card out on the table before inserting the whole thing into the case at the end. So I like the idea of having 2 120mm fans installed at the back, so I'm planning on moving the motherboard tray to the low position. So to do that, we are going to need to remove this panel at the bottom. We can then slide the motherboard tray back into place, and I'm just going to tighten up the thumb screw in the main body of the case. And we'll secure it into place with the 3 thumb screws we removed earlier on. We can slot the panel that was at the bottom in at the top and replace the thumb screw. So you can see we've now got space to install 2 120mm fans at the rear of the case. If you prefer to install a 240mm radiator at the rear, this top PCIe bracket is going to get in your way, so we are going to have to make some adjustments to it. So first thing to do is remove the top slot cover, and then we're going to want to remove this little bracket at the top. There's a screw just here in the rear panel. So that's then going to let you take the bracket out, and what Lian Li say you need to do is rotate it around 180 degrees on its long axis, and then tilt it around 90 degrees towards you. And then you're going to slide the bracket back into place. There's a little notch at the back for it to slot into, and then we can put the screw into place. So you'll see what effectively turning that round has done is it has removed our top PCIe slot, so we've only got 6 slots left. Now for an ATX or eATX motherboard, this won't be a problem because you normally install your graphics card in the 2nd and 3rd slot. It's only for micro ATX and mini ATX motherboards that it may be an issue, but I imagine most people will be going ATX or eATX in the case. So just before we move into the second compartment, it's good to see we've got nice rubber grommets around the motherboard. And because I have moved it into the low mode, we do have these cutouts now which have appeared. Previously the motherboard tray would have been sitting up above these and blocking them out. Now I don't have it included with this case, it may just be because it's a pre-production version of the case, but in the reviewer's guide, Lian Li say there is going to be silicone covers provided which are going to hide these if you switch the case to low mode. We've got this very nice magnetically attached cable cover door on the rear of the case which we can simply open up. And you'll see our case accessory box is on the back of it. So in our case accessory box, we've got plenty of cable ties, we've got the kit for our GPU support bracket, we've got some little rubber pads for mounting SSDs, and we've got a bag of screws. And you can see we've got lots of little dividers, so you are going to be able to organise all the screws out and keep them in their individual compartments. So you can see on the back of this cable cover door, we're going to be able to mount 3 2.5-inch drives. To mount your 2.5-inch drives in the drive bracket, you need to take these rubber pads, pop one of the 2.5-inch drive screws through it, and then screw it into the back of the SSD. Then all you need to do is slot the drive into place on the bracket and push to the side, and that's going to lock it into place. And you can fit one in the middle and one either side of it. At the rear of the case, we've got 2 hard drive cages, and they are individually removable. To remove them, you're going to need to remove the corresponding thumb screw for the drive cage you want to remove. And then to remove the drive cage, it's just a matter of lifting it up, and then you're going to be able to get the rubber pads through the holes and remove the drive cage. So in each of the drive cages, you're going to be able to mount either a 3.5-inch or 2.5-inch drive. Just a simple matter of slotting your drive in, and if you're going with a 3.5-inch drive, you can see we've got 6 rubber grommets on it, and then you're going to use 6 of these hard drive screws to screw into the bottom of the drive, securing it in place. If you're going with a 2.5-inch drive, you can see we've got 4 holes here that don't have rubber grommets on them. And then these are the screws you're going to use. They're the same ones we're going to use to secure our motherboard to the case. They're simply going to go into the holes here and secure into the back of the SSD. And as I've said, it is possible to remove both of the hard drive cages, just a matter of lifting them up and removing them out. And again, this is going to make you additional space for your cables. Although I'm not installing any hard drive cages, I think I'll hopefully have plenty of space for my cables, so I'm just going to leave them in place. Likewise, it is possible to remove this magnetic cable cover bracket. It's just a simple matter of lifting it up to remove them. As you'd expect, cable management looks to be really good. We've got Velcro cable straps at the top and at the bottom, and we've also got these cable management clips. They're just simply held on with rubber grommets. You can push them, that's going to free them up, and then you can move them to wherever you want to and slot them back into place. The idea is your larger power supply cables are going to go in the metal bits, and then you've got these Velcro cable straps on the front for smaller cables like your fan cables. So your power supply is going to go down at the bottom, and we've got this little bracket at the back which protrudes 15mm out of the back, giving you additional clearance for your power supply. So in terms of your power supply compatibility, it is compatible with full-sized ATX power supplies, and the maximum length supported is 182mm up to the start of the cable management clips. If you want to go past that, you can, but it will block the clips, and you can get a power supply up to 232mm if you do. In terms of mounting your power supply, you've got 2 options. You can just simply insert it in from the side and then secure it in the back with the 4 screws, or this bracket is actually removable. It's held on with 4 screws. Then with the 4 screws removed, the bracket is now free. The only other thing I wanted to point out is you'll notice we'll have some cable clips here, and the idea behind this is it's going to help you manage the cables coming down from your motherboard and graphics card with some cable ties to keep them organised. We're now ready to start working on our motherboard, and we're going to be installing our CPU, the bracket for our CPU cooler, our M.2 SSD and our RAM before we put the motherboard into the case. To open our socket cover, we need to push this lever down and out to bring it all the way to the top of the motherboard, and then we can open the socket cover up. We can then insert our CPU into the socket, making sure we've got the text the correct way up, and once we're happy it's seating correctly in the socket, we can close the socket cover down. If we apply a little bit of pressure here, the black bit of plastic normally pops off, and we'll put that into our motherboard box. And then all we need to do is close the lever again to secure our CPU. So our motherboard has 5 M.2 SSDs. This one behind this really beefy heatsink at the top is our Gen 5 slot. Because we've got a Gen 4 drive, we won't get any benefit of installing in the Gen 5 slot, but there would be a downside to doing it. The Gen 5 slot shares PCIe lanes with our top PCIe slot. So we install a drive in here, the PCIe lanes for the top graphics card slot go from 16 to 8. Below it we have 4 Gen 4 slots. They aren't all created equally. The top slot, the PCIe lanes come from the CPU, whereas the other 3 slots, they come from the chipset. So it's the second slot down that we want to install our drive in. So we can go ahead and insert our drive into the slot. And we then go ahead and flatten it down. We can close this little clip which is going to hold our drive in place. Just before we install our heatsink, we need to remove the plastic protection. We're going to be installing our RAM in the second and fourth slot along from the CPU, so we can open the clips on these slots. We can then take our RAM and line it up with the slots. Once we're happy everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure and it's going to clip into place. And then it's exactly the same process with our second stick. Next we need to install the backplate for our CPU cooler. We've got some double-sided adhesive to help this stick to the back of your motherboard. This is only a temporary build for me, so I'm not going to install it, but all you would need to do is pull these bits of plastic off, and then it's just a matter of lining the backplate up with the holes in the back of the motherboard. Then we've got one of these little spacers to go on each side. You'll notice that at one end you've got a star shape, and the other end is hollow, so you are going to want to install it with a star shape facing down. And it's just a matter of pushing one onto each corner. We can then set the motherboard into the case, line that up with the standoffs beneath, and then we're going to secure the motherboard to the case with 7 of the screws with a little lip round the outside. So I haven't installed screws in these two holes because we're going to be using Lian Li's GPU support bracket. So we just need to put the standoff into the hole, and then we've got a stand-up insertion and removal tool in the case accessory box we can put over the top, and we'll put one in the lower hole as well. And then we can install the little metal plate. So I have sized the GPU up in the case, and I think it's the 4th hole up that I'm going to want to install the bracket in. So I'm just going to put the screw in loosely so we are going to be able to move it up and down. Next thing to do is get our case cables plugged in, and our HD audio cable is going to go into this header down the bottom left hand side of the motherboard. So we can go ahead and bring it through the cutout at the bottom, and we're going to get it plugged in with the HD audio text facing up the way. And then we'll just pull the excess cable through to the back. Our front panel connectors are going to go into this header down the bottom right hand side of the motherboard. So we'll go ahead and bring a cable through the cutout. And you'll see that Lian Li have been really kind and combined all the cables into a single header. And we're going to want to plug this in with the text facing up the way. And then again, pull all the excess cable through to the back. Next, we've got our USB 3.0 header here. So we'll bring the cable through the cutout. We're going to go ahead and line it up with the header and push into place. And then pull the excess cable through to the back. And then 2 headers above that, we've got our front panel Type-C connector. So again, cable through the cutout, line it up with the header, push into place and pull the excess cable through to the back. This is our power supply. It is fully modular, coming without any of the cables plugged in. I've gone ahead and plugged the cables in that we are going to need. So we've got a 12-volt type power cable for our graphics card. We've got 2 8-pin EPS cables to provide additional power to our CPU. We've got a 24-pin motherboard cable, and I've also plugged in a SATA power cable. We're not going to need SATA power because we're not installing any SATA drives, but we will need it for our AIO and also our UniFan hub. Another nice feature this power supply has is it has a smart zero fan mode. So whenever the power supply is under low load, the fan will stop spinning, helping reduce noise in the build. So I think it's definitely a good idea to turn that on. We can then set our power supply bracket onto the power supply. And we are going to want to pay close attention to the orientation of it. So these cable clips are going to be facing in towards the middle of the case. And you notice this is the side of the power supply which doesn't have its fan. Its fan is facing down, and this is going to be the side that's facing the side of the case where it's going to be able to get cool air from that vented panel. We can then secure our power supply to the bracket using 4 of the large power supply screws that came with the case. Then we can set our power supply into the case, and we'll secure it into place with the 4 screws. Our 2 8-pin EPS cables are going to go into these headers at the top left of the motherboard. Now, rather than bring them through the rubber grommets at the top, I think it might actually look cleaner to bring them through this cutout here, certainly because I don't have the silicone covers for them anyway. So we can go ahead and bring our cable through the cutout, line it up with the header and push into place. And then the same thing with our second cable. And then we'll just pull the excess cable through to the back. Our 24-pin cable is going to go into this header here, so we're going to bring the cables through the cutout, line them up with a header and push into place, and then just pull the excess cable through to the back. So now we come on to installing our AIO, and certainly having our AIO here, these fans look great. But the problem is they're going to be in exhaust, and that means our only source of intake is going to be at the bottom. And I don't think that's going to be the best cooling configuration. And Lian Li do recommend having the bottom of the case as intake and the side set to intake. The only problem is if I turn these fans round, the back of them isn't going to look great. So what I'm planning on doing is using Lian Li's AL120 V2 uni fans on the radiator as well. And what I think I'll do is I'll have these fans in the rear compartment set to intake, so we're still going to get the benefit of the fans, but we'll do a push-pull configuration on the radiator. And the main reason for doing that is aesthetics. So first thing for us to do is remove the existing fans from the radiator. So you'll see now I've turned the radiator upside down, so the tubes are coming out the bottom, and then we can set our fans on top of the radiator. We can then take our fan bracket and set it on top of the fans. And what we're going to want to do is pass our screws down through the fans and into the radiator. Now the one thing I'm noticing is the fan screw is not actually coming out the bottom, so it's not going to be able to reach the radiator. These screws are only 32 millimeters long, but what I have from another AIO, I've got screws that have exactly the same thread but are 36 millimeters long, so I think they're going to be long enough to pass through. So it's just a matter of passing the screws through the radiator bracket, through the fans, and then getting them into the radiator. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the screws in loosely first of all until we've got them all in, and then we'll tighten them up. So I think you could even get away with 34 millimeter screws, because these are still a wee bit on the long side. Okay, so that's all the screws cut. What I want to do now is just center the radiator bracket up on the radiator, and then we'll go ahead and tighten up the screws. And then just a quick check that the fan blades can all spin freely in the bracket, which they can. So next we can set 3 Lian Li uni fans onto the other side of the radiator, and as we set them on, we're just going to join them together. And you'll notice I've set these to insake, so they were going to be bringing air from outside the case through the radiator. Now on this end we don't need these additional connectors, so they will just twist off. And if we turn them around the other way, you'll see our connector for our fans. So it's just a matter of lining the connector up and pushing it into place. And then we can line the fans up with the holes on the radiator. So these fans are the same thickness as the fans that came with the AIO. So the screws that came with the AIO are going to be perfect for securing these to the radiator. So in terms of how I'm going to connect everything up, I'm going to connect these fans up to our Lian Li Uni Fan hub and connect them up exactly the same way as our case fans. So I'll show you how to connect this cable up when we come on to installing our case fans. Coming from our fans, we've got a PWM cable. So we're going to actually plug this into our pump, and Lian Li's L Connect is then going to be able to control the fans on the radiator. We've got this little slider switch, and our original fans that came with the AIO have 2 speed settings on them, high and low. Now high provides absolutely brilliant cooling, but it is incredibly loud. I've done a full installation and testing video with this AIO, so I'll put a link to that in the description. So we are definitely going to want to have it set to low in terms of noise. So moving on to take a look from our pump, coming from it we've got 3 cables. We've got a USB cable which we're going to plug into a USB 2.0 header on our motherboard. We've got a 4-pin PWM connector we're going to plug into our pump header on the motherboard. And we've got a SATA power connector we're going to plug that into the SATA cable coming from our power supply. Now there is 2 additional cables that we can plug into here. If we don't plug the additional cables in, the PWM cable coming from the fans we would need to plug into the CPU fan header on the motherboard, and our motherboard would have to control the speed of the fans on the radiator. So if we take a look at the side of the AIO, there's a little connector here. It's got a double cable symbol on it, and we can take the double cable that came with our AIO and push it into place. Now coming from it, we've got a 4-pin PWM connector, and if we actually plug the cable from our fans into here, it's going to allow Lian Li's L Connect to control the fans on the radiator, so that seems like a good idea. And the other cable coming from it is an ARGB cable, so we can plug an additional device into this to give it ARGB control. Now this isn't really needed for this particular AIO because it doesn't actually have any ARGB on the fans. If we move around to the other side of the pump, we've got this connector with a single cable on it. And if we wanted to, we could plug in this cable here that comes with the AIO. This cable goes into here, and on the other end we've got a 3-pin 5-volt ARGB cable. This is optional. The only reason to plug it in is if you want the lighting on the pump to be controlled by your motherboard. If you're happy for Lian Li's L-Connect to control it, there's no need to plug it in. You might think to yourself, why not plug it in to give me the option? Well, the reason is the more cables you have coming from the AIO, the more untidy it's going to look. So actually not plugging this in is going to look more tidy, and Lian Li's L-Connect is going to give us all the lighting effects that we need. So we can go ahead and bring the tubes and the pump through to the main body of the case. We can then lower our bracket down. We're going to make sure all the cables stay into the back and then just slot the radiator bracket up and into place. Next, I'm going to add some thermal paste to the center of the CPU. So I've already got our Intel bracket on the AIO. What's important is we've got an LGA 1700 socket, so these little pins, we're going to want to make sure we pull them all the way to the outer setting. If you've got an LGA 1200 socket, you're going to want to push them in towards the middle. Then we can line our pump up with the bracket beneath. Then we're going to want to get each of the thumb screws on the pump to catch. Then it's just a matter of tightening each corner in turn. This is our two CPU fan headers. The top one is our CPU fan header, the lower one is our pump header. So we're going to plug the PWM cable coming from the pump into the pump header. And then I'm just going to route the excess cable up to the top of the case, and then we'll tuck it through at the back. And then just going to pass all the other cables through to the back. We've got two USB 2.0 headers down at the bottom of the motherboard, so I'm just going to bring the USB cable coming from our pump through, and we're going to plug it in with a USB text facing up the way. Then we've got the 4-pin PWM cable coming from our fans on the radiator, and we're going to plug that into the connector coming from our pump. This ARGB cable coming from the pump we don't need to worry about, and we've got a SATA cable coming from the pump which we're going to plug into a SATA cable coming from our power supply. So we've still got the cable coming from our Lian Li Uni fans, and we're going to need to plug that into our Lian Li Uni fan hub that comes with a triple pack of fans. So it's got 4 channels on it, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we'll just go ahead and plug this one into channel number 1, like this. So coming from the hub, we've got 2 SATA power connectors, which we're going to need to plug in to the SATA cables coming from our power supply. On the bottom of the hub, we've got 2 additional connectors we can plug in. This one on the end is for this double connector, and if we do plug it in, on the other end of it, we've got a 4-pin PWM connector and a 3-pin 5-volt ARGB cable, which we need to plug into headers on our motherboard. This is an optional cable. The reason for plugging it in, if you want your motherboard to control the lighting and the fan speed of everything plugged into here. I'm planning on using Lian Li's L-Connect, so I can match the fan speeds up with the fans on either side of the radiator, and also it gives us better control of our case fans. So I'm not going to plug this cable in. The cable in the middle is a USB cable, which we do need to plug in. On the other end of it, we've got a USB cable, and we're going to plug that into a USB 2.0 header on our motherboard, and that's going to let us use Lian Li's L-Connect to control the hub. So we'll pass this cable through to the front, and we'll get it plugged into the other USB 2.0 header down at the bottom of the motherboard, and pull the excess cable through to the back. So I'm just noting that our cables running up to the back of the motherboard don't look particularly tidy, and because we're not going to have any radiators or fans blocking these at the top, they need to be, so I'm just going to put a couple of cable ties on them. Okay, I think you'll agree that looks much better. So there is loads of options for customizing the pump. There's 3 different options that come in the box with the AIO. I'm not going to show this today as I've shown it in a previous video. I'm happy with a standard AIO, but if you want to know how to rotate this or how to change it, I'll put a link to that video in the description. The other important thing, you probably noticed I had a little bit of trouble getting the screws into the back plate, and that was because I didn't use the double-sided adhesive. It was coming away from the back of the motherboard. So it isn't really an optional step with this AIO. You are going to want to definitely stick the back plate to the back of your motherboard. I've got another 3 Lian Li Uni fans, and we're going to set them onto our bottom fan bracket. So just going to center them in the bracket, and then we're going to use the fan screws that came with the case to secure the fans to the bracket. I'm just going to pass our fan cable through to the back, and then we're going to be able to set our fan bracket into place and lower it down. And then we can secure the bracket into place at the bottom with the 2 screws we removed earlier on. And we can slide our bottom dust filter back into place. And I've got two Lian Li Uni fans for the rear set to exhaust. Just going to pass the fan cable through to the back, and then we can set these up into place. And then we'll get them screwed in from the back. Then we've got our other fan cables to get plugged into our Lian Li Uni fan hub. So I'm going to plug our rear fan into channel number 2. And then we've got our bottom fans into channel number 3. We're now ready to install our graphics card, so we're going to need to remove the second and third slot cover from the top. We can then open the clip on our top PCIe slot, and then we just need to get our graphics card lined up with the slot. So I'm just going to push these tubes up and out of the way. And then once we're happy our graphics card is lined up with the slot, it's just some firm pressure to it, and it's going to clip into place. And then we can secure the graphics card into place with the 2 thumb screws that we've just removed. So just going to tidy up our tubes a little bit so we can tilt the tubes down here, and it's going to take a wee bit of pressure so they're not resting on the graphics card. And the ones at the end I'm just going to tilt out a little bit as well. And then there's a leather strap that comes with the I/O to help organise the cables. And we'll just turn it around this way. I don't really have a great way for me to show you. The gap is quite narrow between our graphics card and our fan. But what I'm going to do is just get our screwdriver onto the GPU support bracket. I'm just going to lift the bracket up to where it supports our graphics card and tighten it up. And a very important check when you use any GPU support bracket is just check the fans, that it's not catching on the fans and going to potentially break them if it spins around. So that looks good. In terms of bringing our 12 volt high power cable through the bottom, I'm going to struggle while the fans are here. So what I'm going to do is just remove the bottom fan bracket so I can get the 12 volt high power cable pulled through. So we can go ahead and plug this into our graphics card, making sure we get a nice satisfying click, and then I'm just going to pull the excess cable through to the back. And then what I'm now going to do is just slide the fans back into place. Okay, last thing to do is some cable management at the back. So that's the PC set up and looking great. I've done all this off camera. If you don't know how to install Windows, the drivers, install the RGB software, get it up and running, enter the BIOS, update the BIOS, adjust all the BIOS settings. I've made another video on that and I'll put a link to it in the description. What I'm planning on doing now is a bit of thermal testing, and then I'll be back with a case review. So you want to find out what I thought about the Lian Li O11 Vision, you're going to want to check out that review and I'll put a link to it in the description. So hope you have enjoyed this build guide. If you have, please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well. Thanks for watching.